Hello, people who listen to Absence of Waldo. It's former President George H.W. Bush.
Speaking from beyond the grave.
Oh. No, that was actually me, Marcus, with Chris, co-host of our coverage of The Simpsons. And we're here in a mournful mood, a contemplative mood. A dark night of the soul has truly entered the heart of America.
And may a flight of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Yes, there are no more stars on Earth. They're all up in heaven now. But yes, George H.W. Bush, I'm going to say off the top of my head, 41st President of the United States of America died. Died about a week ago, so we thought we would celebrate the man's life, whatever modest achievements he had.
Yeah, spot on there. I'm our resident fact checker, and yeah, 41st.
Well, I know Trump is 45, so I tried to sort of work backwards quickly sense. In my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, we watched the Simpsons episode Two Bad Neighbors, written by Ken Keeler, directed by Wes Archer. Aired in 1996, January 1996 and all, so this would have been the last year of the first term of Bill Clinton. George H.W. Bush, famous one-term president, the last one, actually, as of this recording. We're both hoping that maybe he'll be joined by someone else very soon.
I wonder who we could be talking about.
Yeah. But yeah, he was a one-term president. He was Ronald Reagan's vice president for both terms. And then he was beaten by Bill Clinton, the sex offender.
Jeez.
Yeah, and then sort of faded into... Oh, I suppose, actually, he had one more achievement. His sperm eventually became George Bush, the president from 2000 to 2008. I think me and you are probably more familiar with his son's achievements than his own, would you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would say that George Bush has not... he's not left much of an impact on me personally. In fact, if anything, most of my knowledge, and probably most of my knowledge of most of the 90s presidents initially, before I started doing my own research, came from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I learned the order of the presidents of like the 20th century was through The Simpsons. That's pretty much how I learned.
Well, I know you are, you're a staunch sort of libertarian, so when he promised not to raise those taxes and then he did, you were really upset, weren't you,
Well, I mean, yeah, he upset me personally, and no, he's a vaguely interesting chap in that, like, he wasn't very interesting. Like, I suppose he presided over a very interesting time in the melting of the whole, like, Cold War period.
Yeah,
he presided over, when the Berlin Wall fell.
Tear down this damn wall.
He was there, like, with, was it Gorbachev?
Yeah, Gorbachev was Russian premier at the time, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, he was presumably in talks with him about, bringing a form of peace to, the proceedings and end the hostilities of the Cold War. I mean, he also presided over during the crisis of the Exxon Valdez. When that oil tanker spilled and basically...
I don't know about
this. It was massive, yeah.
Right.
It was like a big oil tanker that I think it grounded in Alaska and basically killed like millions of like animal life, and President Bush did, well, next to nothing.
Oh, well, he had some notice. Well, like all of them, there were like horrible things he was famous for. Like the first Gulf War happened under him.
Yeah.
That was widely seen as a blatant attempt to get more popularity on the eve of his run for second term. That actually is probably the most well-known thing in England, because our Prime Minister John Major followed him into the Gulf War, which lasted, I think, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And resulted in estimates of like hundreds of thousands to 1 million people being killed in the aftermath of the war. Anyway, we didn't just read up some facts on Wikipedia about George Bush. We also watched an episode of television. Season 7. What do you think of Two Bad Neighbors, the episode?
Two Bad Neighbors is I like it.
I think it's really funny. Yeah.
Like rewatching it now is a bit weird because I think part of this episode we kind of have to explain like why the Simpsons had such a beef with George Bush.
I just wish more families were like the. Oh, that's aged horribly now, because isn't he talking about the family that the Cosbys played?
Families should be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. Yeah.
How funny would it be if he just said, like, people should be more like Bill Cosby, not Homer Simpson?
Yeah. So famously, I think on the campaign trail, in a call to bring back a more wholesome, conservative style of family, George Bush decried that families should be more like the Waltons, obviously of the what's that show called?
The Waltons.
Yeah, well, what were they in?
Honeymooners?
No, let's have a look.
The Waltons. I don't actually. I thought it was genuinely the family that the Cosbys played.
No, it's I'm 99% sure that
it's called the Waltons.
The Waltons, yeah. Families should be more like the Waltons and less like. Sorry, I'm just looking at us. We're all about fact checking these days, Yeah.
Well, we got really stung on previous things where we lied.
Yeah, where we just straight up lied. Yeah. Families should be a lot more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons, and obviously the Simpsons writers took some form of offence to this, and have since, in the episodes around that time, there was like the occasional jab at Bush. Like, I think the Simpsons actually made like a little like special response video to it. Like, like whole like pre like YouTube and all this sort of stuff. They made like a little like response video to it. And then it came out in full force in this episode where the writers... Basically, this episode is not intended to be any kind of form of political satire or looking at Bush's presidency. It was apparently written just as an excuse so Homer could beat up George Bush Sr. And apparently the script was handed out to all the actors, and they were like, this is the worst political satire I've ever read. And they were like, it's not meant to be. We just want to beat up George Bush. So here we are. Almost, was it like 20...
It's 22 years later.
22 years later.
Nearly 23, yeah.
Yeah, George Bush is now dead.
Yeah.
So we thought it'd be high time to take a look at this little doozy of an episode.
Yeah, I think it's quite good. It's not like a deep one or anything.
It's funny.
It's very
consistently
funny.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Like it's very, very silly. It's very silly. Like, I mean, because all the other episodes in this season, and I suppose we'll talk more about season 7 when we kind of get to it eventually.
In a few years.
In a few years' time, yeah, when we finally...
After we talk about the death of several other presidents.
Yeah. So we'll talk about season 7 eventually, but it was definitely like a turning tide for the series. This episode is very silly.
Yeah.
And it's obviously endemic of kind of a lot of kind of what went wrong with The Simpsons, pretty much starting from season 8 onwards.
I like season 8. I think 8's a great season.
Season 8 is a good season, but it's when the rot starts to set in. But it's the episode with the principal and the pauper in it.
That's number 9.
Are you sure?
100% sure Principal and the Pauper is the second episode of season 9.
Don't give me any of your fake news.
Can I just do real jokes instead?
Real jokes?
I'm telling you, because we actually reviewed Principal and the Pauper for this...
Did we? I don't remember doing that.
Yeah, we did, and we both said that it was... I liked it more than you did. But yeah, you had a pretty negative response to it.
Did not enjoy it. No, I think it's shit. I never thought it was very good. And if anything, I probably dislike it even more now after listening to the commentary.
Oh, is that the one where they just sort of say the fans are wrong, we've done nothing wrong?
Well basically, the writer says, isn't it odd how people get invested in stories? That's pretty much what he says. I'm like
Paraphrasing
a little bit, but basically he says something along the lines of, it's so weird that people are so invested in Principal Skinner. And the other writers are like, well, yeah, because people spend all these years watching the show, they kind of get to like characters. They're like, yes, but don't you think that's odd? And it's like, what? So, what's your point? Like, you're basically criticising the audience for not accepting this terrible plot twist.
Well, the thing is, they don't even do it properly, because in the end of it, it sort of turns out he's not Principal Skinner anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, no, they say, like, let's go back to, believing everything's sort of as it was before.
Yeah.
So they kind of just, yeah. Well, the one that in season 8 that everyone hates, or hated, and I think it's come around again, is the Frank Grimes episode.
Oh, I love that one.
That's season 8.
That's a classic.
Yeah, I love that one.
In my opinion, that's a 10 out. So, yeah, that's a really divisive one. For, like, really old school Simpsons fans, we're talking like season 2, season 3 fans. That's a really one we don't people tend not to like.
Yeah.
But I think it's brilliant.
I think it's really clever and really funny. Yeah.
But yeah, okay, yeah. So, so it was a recent change. Sorry, we got sidetracked here. Yeah. So there was a recent change of showrunners.
Yeah.
I think from like season 6 onwards. And it kind of slightly changed the way they wrote things. The episodes did get a little bit more cartoony, but they kind of still kept a lot of the same rules of like the previous seasons. Which is basically, it's around this time when The Simpsons produced some of like their all-time greatest episodes.
Yeah.
Like Mother Simpsons in this season, which is one of my personal favourites. Just a great season. But this episode is it's very silly.
Well, there's almost nothing to it. Like, there's no jokes that are like endemic of like the rot of American society. There's no like anything deep about the characters.
No,
it's just a silly excuse to do some jokes about Bush that are pretty toothless and yeah. Saying that though, it's incredibly funny. Like that bit where the bits where Bart is sort of ridiculing Bush are just absolutely hilarious to watch.
It's like Dennis the Menace, but like the American Dennis the Menace.
Yeah,
like with Mr. Wilson and all that. There are some great jokes in this one. I mean, like I love the ending when Homer befriends Gerald Ford.
That's really funny.
That's great. That's really funny. I like how they create a version of George Bush, which is obviously not really much like the actual George Bush, but almost like this caricature of him. Mm-hmm. Like he's kind of like a mumbly, kind of like, he's kind of miserable, kind of boring kind of person. Yeah. Like, I love the scene where he's writing his memoirs and he's like, and I accomplished all my goals in my first season. I did not see a point in continuing for a second. That's how he ends his memoirs. Like on that really exciting note.
I do think it's pretty fun. It's relatively scathing of him, though. He just sits around all day, like, hating on Clinton and wishing he could have run for a second term.
He's not the only person who'd hate on Clinton, but,
Well, it's got a bit of a sort of South Park kind of end of history, like, oh, there's no need to ridicule anyone anymore, kind of. It's very light-hearted kind of thing, is what I'm trying to say, basically.
Yeah.
And like,
There's, I don't think there's any pretense on trying to make this some kind of like grand statement about Bush and his presidency and, how he impacted the average American.
Yeah, the man in this just comes across as kind of like
he's a buffoon.
He's a buffoon. He's basically there to be like the polar opposite of Homer, but also incredibly like him. So he's sort of a fastidious version of him, but just as petty and wanting to.
Yeah.
This could be like a Flanders episode with very little tweaking.
That's one thing that I did like as well. That like Flanders got on really well with George Bush Senior. Like I like that. So if you don't see the episode, the long and short of it is that a posh mansion, which is all of a sudden opposite The Simpsons and is not seen again, is bought up by former President George Bush and his wife Barbara. Yeah. Both deceased now, because Barbara died earlier this year.
God, watching these old episodes, it's going to be like a panoply of like references to people who've died now.
Well, yeah. So
Gorbachev, I'm sure he must be dead as well.
Gorbachev, I feel like he is, yeah. Or is he? I don't know. We're all about fact-checking this episode, because we check a lot of things. It was a very 90s episode as well, because it was like, Ayatollah and stuff, and like.
He is an asshole. Did you get a lot of references to things that actually happened during his presidency? Like, did you get the one where it referenced the fact he was sick on the Japanese Prime Minister?
Oh, right, yeah. I don't know a lot about him, to be fair.
I know some of the stuff like that's really funny though.
Oh, Gorbachev is indeed still alive.
God, how old is he?
He is. He was born in
must be in his 80s then.
Yeah, he's very old. 87.
Yeah, jeez.
Still around.
Wow. But yeah, basically there was a time where he had dinner with the, he had like, it might have been like a big assembly, there's video footage of it, and it's him and he's eating some at Dodge, and he like leans over and he's sick in the Japanese Prime Minister's lap.
Great.
They reference that in that. Yeah, a lot of the jokes are just about the fact he never managed to secure a second term.
Yeah, which obviously is quite famous anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose a lot of the kind of more minutiae jokes are recognisable to like a 90s adult audience.
I'm assuming anyone relatively plugged in at the time would have got this like instantly.
Yeah.
But
as we've said before, it's not to make any kind of like grand statement about like Bush, his presidency. Like it's just kind of just an excuse just to.
It doesn't even do like it's not even a parody of sort of like small suburban tyrants. It's just pure silliness.
Yeah. It's a very ridiculous episode, which I think is ultimately kind of enjoyable. I liked it. I didn't love it. It definitely wasn't as funny as I remember it being.
I thought it was funny, but yeah, it's not one of the best ones ever. It's not one of the sort of classic Simpsons episodes.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, yeah, there's just too little about it that makes it like, yeah.
I think ultimately it comes down to how funny you find the concept of Homer beating up a former president is.
That's not that funny an idea.
No, I suppose not. No, I mean I used to find it quite funny when I was younger, but it's kind of like the whole like anarchic, like, oh my god, he's beating up like a president of a free world, like you know.
That would be more funny if there wasn't like a president now who's literally like a game show host.
No, not literally. He is a game show
host. That's what I mean. Yeah, like the presidency has lost so much sheen now. I feel like
he literally was a game show host.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like it's not that important to he's not like some kind of grand ambassador or anything now. It is literally just like a buffoonish moron now. So like I don't think the idea of him beating him up is that funny now. Like.
No,
I mean it's not disrespectful or anything to him. Like it's not like something bad to watch after he's died. Or
I mean, like maybe like back in the 90s, it was kind of like a bit of like, oh, they're going there kind of thing.
I think you had more of that bollocks around the presidency back then about it being like an important job or something, or like the leader of the free world kind of thing.
I suppose as well as the whole thing of the whole anarchic spirit of the Simpsons, which obviously lost some of its sheen. Like in the subsequent seasons, but like it was very critical of the establishment.
Yeah, like you had episodes about religion, sort of.
Well, there's one of my favorite episodes, Miss Lisa Goes to Washington.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's really like it does not paint a good picture of American democracy whatsoever. But the Simpsons, just in general, has always been fairly anarchic. And I feel like kind of our spirit's always been very like, this is what we can do with a cartoon now. We can have an episode where our main character beats up a former president. Like, because also, this is like pre-South Park, pre-Family Guy, they were still pushing the boundaries on what an adult cartoon could get away with.
Yeah.
So I suppose in that context, then, it is fairly like, oh my god, they went there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hold up now.
No, well, yeah, there's just nothing to it really. Like, I think, like so many of the references are specific to like little things that happened during his presidency as well.
Unless you were alive and switched on during his presidency, or you've read a book about him, or you know a bit more about him, then it's not going to be like the most obvious references in the world.
The voice is pretty good though. The voice sounds a lot like him.
Good. Yeah.
I got no idea who actually does it, but like whoever's doing it is doing a very good George H.W. Bush impression.
Let's take a look. We're all about fact checking this episode. This is what we do.
We need to know who plays this George H.W. Bush character. The bit with Gorbachev is really funny as well.
I love that. Yeah.
Don't let the Russians know, and then like
we can't let them give up.
They're going to love this back home. I'm going to guess it's one of the regulars. Is it Harry Shearer?
Yeah, Harry Shearer, yeah. And Dan Castellaneta does Gerald Ford. It's quite appropriate.
Yeah. Disco Stew's in this episode as well.
Oh, yeah, I liked that, yeah.
There is just nothing to talk about in this episode, is there? It's just random silliness.
It's just a silly episode, yeah.
Yeah. So on that, we'll crank on to... Here's to George H.W. Bush. You were a president. We can give you that. Anything else to add?
No. I think you were a president. You sure were.